My heavy duty glasses broke. So I have Chintzy from Amazon. The heavy duties are prescription 2.5, 1.75. I picked 2.0. Probably going to go 2.25. That'll be closer to one, a little bit beyond the other. But so far, even with the implants there, the lens replacements for cataract, no problem. My eyes adjust quite well, which is surprising. When the doc says, well, your lenses aren't going to adjust like they used to. Well, so far, I've been pretty happy. It won't be later. And he says I'm developing a cataract on the pupil on this side, which we were both, he had explained before. So what's that have to do with water and fuel? Nothing yet. I just tell stories to begin anyway. That way you're all warmed up and you hear me and you get used to my voice cadence and my own way of doing things. Water and fuel. Story. Now, this idea popped into my head when I was watching one from Dave at Dave's Automotive Service, or Dave's Auto Service out there in Utah. And Dave has a lot of things on diesels and gas and such, and this one was a diesel, and it had fuel contamination, and he says it's not from bad fuel. In case, no. For some reason, an automotive on filters and care here taken, care there taken, and you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry too much about water in the fuel because it doesn't sit in the tank very long, right? Gone, especially diesel. Big truck pulls up and 150 gallons is gone in a couple of minutes, you know. Big old nozzle just pouring it in there. So they don't have a lot of fuel trouble there. But we did off-road construction stuff. Farm does too, mainly because they use a lot of 5-gallon containers. Their trucks will have tanks in them. And they get busy, they have to wash the tanks out, flush them out at least once a year, completely drain them, blow them out, clean them out, drain them out again. Then don't use water and soap. Just use diesel fuel. And you say, why? Because anything left behind, contamination. And most tanks have corners in them. Corners hold water and contamination, and they don't clean out well. So if you can, you get in there and slosh and do what you can to get it all cleaned out. If you use anything else, mineral spirits or even gasoline, something that'll mix with the diesel at least, and won't cause any other trouble. So, and you'd say, mine's so bad I had to steam clean it. Well, you know, go ahead. Just I'd recommend after that putting a salamander on it or some type of heater to get the thing warmed up to 100 degrees or so, or leave it out in the sun to bake off all the excess water and have it tilted to one direction so all the water collects in one place. And get it cleaned out. Because even the drains on these things usually aren't 100%. So if that's the case, just make sure you have it clean. In my case, when I was talking about WIF sensors as well, I want to get into an idea where I'm going to reverse this, talk about WIF sensors first. You'll notice I don't have any, this is it. I don't take notes. I'm just top of my head. So things go where they go. WIF sensor has a couple of different styles. One of them is a contact, where they have two contacts together, and there will be the diesel fuel causes no connection, and when water gets onto them, ding, because water has stuff in it and usually pulls stuff out of the diesel fuel and concentrates it. The water hits the contacts, which I think they said they're, what is that? Not palladium. I can't remember. It's the next step up, platinum. Yeah. No, this isn't Iron Man. Palladium. Palladium in the chest, Tony. Horrible way to die, eh? Anyway, platinum is usually what those two probes are. And when it makes the contact, then it goes into the computer and gives it the signal. Well, the other style is a floater. And they have different styles of floaters. A single that comes up and makes contact. They have a big ring that'll be in the bottom and comes up and will make mechanical contact between a couple of contacts, similar to the other style. This one has water on it. The other one has the floater that makes connection. Or in some cases, possibly breaks connection, but most often it makes a connection. Now, the first one with the two prongs, the two electrodes, so to speak, but they aren't electric. So what would you call them? They're passive. Anyway, two doinkers. and they're waiting for that little piece of water to contact. They're expensive. You'll see that the little plastic nubbin on the bottom of that filter, or even sometimes the screw-in contact, you will notice that you'll buy the filter and it's expensive because usually it's in the pre-filter with 10 microns and specific material inside to cause the water to separate from the diesel fuel, drop to the bottom. And so the filter could be $100, $150. In some cases, the secondary filters, $250 even. Mine's never, no, don't buy the cheap stuff either. On your farm tractor, you can get away with Napa, but in construction and industrial, don't you dare. Just don't go to AutoZone and buy the filter unless you're desperate. Trust me, we found out in the past is the primary filters are so poor that it's rated 10 micron, but it's on the poor end of the scale, and it'll plug your 2 or 3 micron filter downstream. And on some of the old stuff with jerk pumps, the final filter is 10 micron, and the pre-filter is 30 micron. So, let's not quibble here. You buy the cheap stuff, you're in trouble. I've seen fuel systems gel up, warm the whole thing up, replace the primary filter, which is 10 micron on the newer high pressure fuel injection system, common rail in particular. They replace just the primary and be fine. But it doesn't happen often because the secondary usually plugs up with a paraffin. But if you're talking just plain trash, dirt, and water, just replace the primary and most of the time you're good. But most cases in other machines, you're not. In particular, 6068 John Deere I worked on. Several of them that was in, I can't remember, it was air compressors, good size air compressor. And you had to replace both filters every time, whether it was John Deere, Napa, or who it was. Deere were better filters, but still all of them had the same problem. When one filter went bad, the other one went bad. Don't know what to tell you. Your Fleet Guard, your Caterpillar, and probably even Detroit Diesel Allison, Komatsu's, and others are going to be far better filters, even though you have to bite the bullet and see that they're made in China. So now that we know the basic water and fuel sensors, they have to understand too that they're small. They're not designed to pick up a lot of water, which means the filter itself is not designed to separate a lot of water out of the diesel fuel. But it's got a sediment bowl in there. It does. But if the sediment bowl floods, it overwhelms the sensor, overwhelms the filter, and fuel, because of the turbulence, will atomize the water and send it through the filter in smaller particles because the filter is overwhelmed, and it'll get through. It's just the way it is. Some of the additives from the filter, some of the crap that came through with the water will actually change the surface tension of the water and send it through. Now, to my story. We had a WA, and we're talking years ago now, WA 450-6 loader from a semi-local quarry come down. They ran a lot of salt with it, so varying temperatures is what that loader lived in. They were loading salt from Cargill up in the Ithaca area, Tompkins County. And it came in, and the primary filter was full of water. The engine was overheating pretty continuous and did some tests up there. A quick test was. Well, he got through running it, parked it, pulled the cap off, and had him fired up. And you could just wait about 1 minute, maybe 2, and you'd start seeing little foaming bubbles come up through. Shut it off. Stopped. Almost immediately. Not quite, because it had to finish filtering up through. The top of the radiator was considerably higher than the engine. It was a big dang radiator. I said, okay, well, if that's the case, radiator shot. Needs a recore minimum. But that's not what we knew was going to happen. We said, the thing has to be 100%. Yeah, well, I lose connection here constantly. So don't worry about that blip. So hey, we had known what had happened. Went through the engine, started on a teardown, and found one head gasket with one deformation and miscoloration of it. Said, okay, we found the source. And the customer walks in and said, sell me a reman. You guys have terms on this, right? They had terms and extended warranty. So he got all excited and bought a reman engine, brought the thing in. In the meantime, while we were going through this, and before they gave him the quote, they asked the 3 of us in the shop to list what was wrong with the machine. And to come to find out, 2 of us, our lists were darn near identical. And one guy added some more stuff that even I might not have bothered with because it just wasn't that important. But we are in there I didn't put it in because I knew our company at Anderson down here in Endicott and the management thereof was so sleazy, cheap, and dirty that they would charge for the labor, but they wouldn't charge for the parts and tell them their hoses are getting replaced. Well, Kevin had all kinds of hoses on there because the engine was going to be out and the hoses would be bad. Well, we were careful. We never hit the hoses, but we had to flex them to disconnect them. So we disturbed these hoses that had 18,000 hours on them. That was the other reason the customer thought that maybe just replace the engine. We're here. It's going to be needing an overhaul. Just replace it. Cool. So we get through with this, and on our list, all three of us had the same. Well, two of the three of us had the same thing. The notation of water in the fuel, meaning the fuel tank has to be pulled down, tested for leaks, and cleaned. And they balked at that. I don't mean the customer. I mean the company. And not just balked, angry, vicious. We're talking borderline name calling and personal character assassinations on two of us. That's stupid. We're not putting up with that. Why did you even do that? Nobody in their right mind would think of. And it went on like that. When I said, you're going to ask, well, what did I do? I looked at him and said, what stupid moron sits there and makes up a quote without considering after 18,000 hours cleaning the fuel tank that obviously has water in it? That only an idiot ignores that. Come to find out, he'd already made the quote and handed it over to the customer and then asked us the list. So because his butt was in hot water, he wanted us to just plain cover for him that, okay, it doesn't need that. And I just said, no, you people are stupid if you don't consider that. Well, it's got a water. And another guy came out later on, number 3. Don't need it, don't need it, don't need it. Okay. So we put the thing all together. There were several other problems with it, and when the end result, what had happened was we had water and fuel problems that went through the system. It wiped out, what did we have? It wiped out the original injection pump, or high pressure pump, I should say, and they wouldn't let me put it on in the first place. I said the injectors have gone bad, meaning that when the injectors are going bad, that means the contamination's coming from and has gone through the fuel pump. We need to replace both. No. Okay. So I put a set of injectors in. And the pump went bad. Finally, it went final bad. I knew it was bad before, told them that, and they were angry. Same thing, character assassinations going on. And when we got through with it, it came back with the injectors. The first set, they said, well, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. So there's the test right there for you. Well, I don't believe it because, well, you want to come up and do the test with me? Come on, get in the seat. I'd been 50-something years old and wasn't having some dumb punk that hadn't done the work in that long, being just a few years older than me, and hadn't touched a wrench in decades. You're not telling me this. I sat there and looked at it and told you. Told you before I left. I told you when I came back. And I told you I wanted to work harder. And we warned you before we did the job. Well, it's got a fuel water separator. Yeah, it's designed to take water out of the fuel, not unsuspended water that's coming through in chunks. In blobs. So he got so mad with some of it because he talked to me and he talked to the other guy, and the other guy being one who was much usually, how can I say it, generally more complicit. But he would give you the truth in the first place and then do whatever you wanted after. Well, knowing that I was the guy in the shop that they had to come to as the Shell answer man, I didn't back off because it's my name that's on it and you're going to eat it. I'm not eating it for you. I'm not your company man. I have to stand on my own because I'm the road guy. When you got to stand on your own and you know he's going to stab you in the back if something goes wrong, you got to stand. So they tore one of the injectors apart, and he started laughing. And we were looking for a guy that was happy to tear it apart, number 3, to find something wrong, that you screwed up, you said this, and I'm going to go tell Jerry. And that was his normal, constant. He got buried for it, I don't know how many times. Didn't matter, he's a company guy. Whatever the company wants, I'll do it. If it means screw an employee, sure, no problem. He had no moral values about him, but claimed to be a libertarian. Yeah, he's a piece of work, that one. Libertarian in the fact that he was a Marxist. Whatever was good for him and good for the company, that's what he was for. Lie, cheat, steal, didn't matter to him. So he opened up the injector, pulled the two-way valve off the top, took a look at the valve, covered the tip on the bottom, the stop nub on the top, the induction plate, the coil housing. It was all rusted. I said, of course it was. He says, well, look at that. And I said, look at what? Water that dripped out under the table? Yeah, there was. There's a big old bubble of water fell out of the two-way valve in the top of the injector on the table. The area was the size of my pinky nail, just in the injector top, or the nozzle, as you want to call it. So we'd warned them before, warned them during, warned them after, warned them later, and we ended up with the same thing. Every screw up and trial that came from that company and that particular middle manager was run through the Endicott shop so that we would take the blame for it. And that was one of them where he was going to be the company hero. Well, later on, the machine came back in and they couldn't hardly get the tank out. When they finally got things cleaned up to try and take the tank out, my buddy found a gash, or actual crack in the tank this long that the edges were rounded over and you could take a piece of wire and shove it through there. The only thing that kept water from going in there was it was covered in stone and salt and dirt and etc., which the salt is what aggravated the problem. So not only was it water in there, it was salt water of varying content. So we had tried to point this out previous and we got into a lot of trouble. But it wiped out the fuel water separator filters, wiped out the secondary filter, which wiped out the pump itself, which, as some of you were surmising, with that type of salt water going in there, the salt would liquefy and go through and cause corrosion and other problems within the system. So we had 2 high pressure pumps. 2? Or is it 3? We had a full set of injector replacements, another set of partial replacements, and I think by the time we got done, there was somewhere around, 2, 12, I think 14 or 15 total injectors and 2 high pressure pumps. What do you do with that? Now, if you go to Dave's Automotive, he'll tell you what they do in the automotive system. What they did in the automotive is they're sure of contamination. The entire system gets taken apart and cleaned. All of it. From the fuel tank on forward all the way through. And we're talking automotive, not even critical construction. Now, mind you, when we got done with all of this, and you say you're still bashing managers, exactly, because the problem here was totally avoidable, completely avoidable. Originally, I got called up there for overheating, so we went up again, 2 of us, and I put a thermostat in it, which I knew was a complete waste of time. But we did it because we knew it was a reman engine with a cheap thermostat in it. And it was. There was almost a half a pound, like a 6 to 8 ounces difference between the 2 thermostats. The reman El Cheapo, which was working fine, and then the heavy-duty massive brass and steel Komatsu that was in there. We replaced it, and while I was doing that, my buddy climbed up on top and was looking in because it was all drained. He couldn't find a single open core within the view of the fill cap. None. Not one. And you say, why did that happen? When combustion leaks into the coolant, most coolant has specific chemicals in it. Now, the old stuff had silicates in it, and that would crystallize easily. Sometimes crystallize and fall out. But in this case, what we have is it crystallizes the salts that are in there, which is most modern antifreeze has specific types of salts to change the chemical structure to prevent cavitation in the sleeves, as well as corrosion from chemical corrosion. And what I mean cavitation is from the sleeve slapping inside the coolant. As it does, the coolant has to fill the gap quickly as that sleeve vibrates while it's running. It doesn't take much vibration, and if that coolant can't follow the sleeve, then they start banging against each other, and literally, molecular structure starts pounding the sleeve apart. Sleeve loses every time because the coolant hits it, and when it hits so hard, it vaporizes. When it vaporizes, it takes something off the sleeve, and after a while, it eats through it. So it's got to be both chemical as well as the cavitation of it. So while they're going through that with your coolant, then you get a combustion leak into it. It tends to crystallize these into larger crystals. They come up into the top end of the radiator where it's nice and hot, and they start collecting on the top of the tubes going into the radiator. And in this case, the guy was a little cheap on maintenance, so it had old coolant in it, and it was covered every one of the. If you can imagine a radiator that's like 4 or 5 cores wide, and the cores are large enough, you can darn near stick a small woman could put her pinky in there, and you've got an entire radiator standing there, almost 4 foot high, like 3.5 feet, probably near 40 inches, and the thing's 18 inches wide, and you couldn't, through that big old gaping hole, Kevin couldn't see a single one of the cores that was open. We knew that, and that's why we told them it had to be recored or completely replaced. And they came out, and again, the character assassinations and the screaming started again. Told them about the fuel tank. We know there's a crack of some sort in there. There's a leak. We know it's there. It's either a fitting off of it or something. And they ignored that completely. So both could have ignored the whole problem and avoided the warranty enough that if they didn't lie on the warranty, the company itself would have had to cover the warranty of it. And I believe in the end result, our own company at Anderson, when I was there, had to eat some of this warranty work. Because water in the fuel isn't something that's Komatsu's problem. It's Komatsu Reman. So, when you're looking and you hear Dave constantly talking and going on and on and on, and some of the rest of us talking always about service, 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 good quality filters, good quality fuel filters on your storage pump. If you got it in the back of a truck, a fuel filter on there, on your pump system, always have filters on there that are water separator capable. Now, New York State, here in the southern tier, and even up into the central part of the state, we have the problems where there's flooded areas and flooded regions. And when they do, it floods a lot of stations, and they do what they call a pump off. They'll pump the fuel off until a little water comes through, then they'll stop. Well, there's already suspended water in the fuel will rise to the top of the water, but not all the water settles out. We already have suspended water in the fuel as much as it can handle. It's flooded. Then on top of that, you're pumping off the top until you can see water or feel water in it. Then they stop. And they transfer it to these mobile sites, mobile trucks, or even direct into the construction equipment. We had that in 2006 and 2011. When both floods, the major floods that we had in this area, one was a 500-year flood and the other was a 1,000-year type of frequency type of flood. And flooded gas stations all over the region here. Schoharie County, when I used to live up there, that was constant down in the Middleburg and Schoharie area, and down below that, Blenheim, Gilboa, and some areas down through there. So we were familiar with it. And then we had trouble with that where we had to actually go back through the rental fleet, and we changed the filter replacement warnings and notifications in the monitor. And it was 250, what was it, 500 and 1,000, and we brought it all the way down to 150 and I think 350. And even sometimes that wasn't tight enough. But at least the warning would come up to replace the filter. And sometimes we'd get the filter warning where the filter was overwhelmed, water and fuel type of thing, and we'd have to go up and replace it anyway. So later on, we were able to reset that, and somebody called in and said, "What do you think you're doing to these machines?" We laughed. I said, "Keeping them running." So when you do an engine overhaul, those are two of the main things to always remember every time. Always. I mean, as in an definitive, infinitive, whatever. Your radiator and your fuel tank and your fuel system, the fuel lines, all of that has to be involved. And in our case, like I was saying before, the transmission hoses that were running to the cooler right along there that connected to the bottom of the radiator that we had to remove. We had to take the fittings off, but because of the JIC type of fittings they were, which I think they're actually Komatsu style fittings that were on there, which is JIS, Japanese version of our JIC with Komatsu fine thread. It's actually a better fitting, but both work. So you have to pull it off, you have to crinkle the hose. So we ended up with several hoses leaking in the middle of the frame. It would have been nice and easy when we had the engine on. Just saying, sit down and write out your list of what needs to be replaced. And along with that, while you're considering, go back to the 7 steps that I've done in here on the videos, the 7 steps of troubleshooting. It's borrowed from John Deere and modified a little bit my way, but I was trying to add in for the electronic systems that we have today. 7 steps of troubleshooting while you're going through will give you a consideration of not just what the failure is, what was the cause of the failure. And that was one of the things Kevin was harping on in the hardest way possible. If the engine is not running right, causing a problem, a failure, it 17, 18,000 hours on an engine that's easily lasts 20,000 hours. Yes, that's still a good life, but it's a percentage off. And being a Komatsu 125 engine, that's easily a 20,000 hour engine in loaders and excavators. Easily. So why did it fail at 18,000? And we came to the conclusion there are 2 major things that we have to look at when you're doing the estimate. And they ignored that from the estimate. We ate it all. Almost all of it. The only thing that he ate, the customer, they conned him into paying for the radiator itself, but didn't pay for any of the labor, which was hours and hours and hours, because some jackass decided we had to drive from the southern tier around Binghamton, go all the way up near and beyond Auburn, New York, to drop the radiator off. Because the new Eastern area rep knew there was a good radiator shop there. Well, the original radiator shop was just fine. But when you make the phone, drop the radiator off and tell them, recore it or rot it out, it's got to be 100%. Okay. And then you call down over your head and tell them, just patch the leaks and send it back. We're saving the company money. And literally they did. They told the customer that all would be taken care of in 100%. They did, which was the second or third time they'd done the same thing. Irony of ironies, when I first went to Anderson to look for a job, the manager that was there at that time, about 2002 or so, was fired shortly thereafter in a manner of, you will leave or we will can you. And he semi-left of his own volition. Why? Because they called him in and found out that he was selling units out of the shop as Komatsu reman units, and they were repairing the units within the shop, but selling it to the customer as a Komatsu reman with a Komatsu warranty. That happened multiple times. So what do we run into? The exact same thing with the exact guy who was his equivalent in another branch. Probably helped getting fired because that branch was overseeing this branch. And I'm sure he assisted in getting him fired and was doing the exact same thing himself. And there we were going through it again, the same person lying, cheating right through his teeth. And this was the second major customer in a row because we had a WA 600 with a 140 engine that they told him he'd have all the upgrades, and we rebuilt the engine for him, and nothing was upgraded anywhere in that engine unless it was the only way to get the part. They bought used and reman and everything possible as low and cheap and hunted for it all over the country. I told the guy it'd be brand new just like a Komatsu reman. So it doesn't work. We got bit in both cases badly. So when you're doing this stuff, 7 steps of troubleshooting, make your repair list after considering all, knowing what the final actual failure is of the engine, not just high hours. What made an engine that looked excellent inside fail thousands of hours before it was due? And then you go back and say, what's the root cause of this? There was 2 root causes possible, and both of them caused overheating. So you go back to Dave's simple list that they also did at Anderson, but they simplified it too far. You know the complaint, find out the cause, figure out what you're correcting and what the correction is, and 4, when you're done, confirm that it is corrected. Not just partially. There should be a 5th one even on Dave's list. Confirmation that it's confirmed into the future. That you have every evidence here, that you have a confidence, not just that it's running right now, but it's running right into the future. And if you don't, notate that so the customer knows what they're paying for. So you have it in writing to protect yourself, but also the customer knows that when he takes it out there and 6 months later it craps out, he's coming back because you gave him the honest assessment. It's a huge difference. And let me tell you something from experience. And I can say this because I got the genetics. Don't screw with an Italian construction owner, especially in the southern tier of New York State. We haven't heard anything about concrete galoshes in 30 or 40 years. Because Because one guy walked up and said, "Oh, you telling me this is a slave of labor, do you?" He said, "I picked up a 2x12 and swung it, tried to hit the guy in the head and said, 'Get out of here.' 'Well, you're going to take me back, aren't you?' He says, 'Ha! That would be like slave labor driving you around, would it not?' 'I got work to do.' 'Walk!' 'What are you going to pay me for?' 'Nothing. You haven't done a lick of work.' Swung the board again. 'I'm gonna call cops on you.' He says, 'You do that. I fixed that too.'" Don't screw around with hardworking Italians here in the Southern Tier. Well, that is not. There's not an Italian down here that works in construction that would disagree with me in any way. These are good, solid people down here. And if you don't screw with them and you treat them right, they'll never forget you. You treat them wrong, ugh,